So my skeptical mind, and that's just who I am. My skeptical mind goes to, well, yeah, of course, you've got this guy over here that's logical and reasonable, and you got this guy over here that's wearing a tinfoil hat. Of course, the tinfoil hat guy's gonna see a lot of stuff, right? He's like imagining it, or he's watched one too many sci-fi movies.
But it can be used to help us frame hypotheses for UFO propulsion, power, stealth, weaponry.
Everything that we experience is very positive.
Sometimes the field of ufology has a short memory span.
We didn't know anything about the $22 million back then. We just kind of thought, well, this is, and I think that was the reason why they were looking for military-type people, because in the military, you work with whatever you got, no matter what the situation is, and you just kind of adapt and overcome.
What are you going to do with all this? You can't even take care of your own files and get them put into the current system, but yet you want to go collect other people's things. So what are you going to do with it? Who are you giving all this to?
It just really struck me about how the common thread seemed to be deception, but deception of a human nature. So that's what I started thinking, who would these folks be? I mean, then I started thinking about the intelligence agencies, what role they could play, and what would be their motivations for getting involved in ufology.
I'm not saying that because the gimbal is not a rotating flying saucer, that means that all the UFOs are false. Not at all. All I'm doing is I'm looking at this one case.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Erica Lukes, and of course, it's been another interesting week in the world of UFOs, as we've seen with more footage being released of questionable objects, and you know how that rolls out. It's never a dull moment, and as some of you know, there will be a show on 60 Minutes with Leslie Kean and crew that will be on, and I will be watching that, and it won't be with bated breath, but it should be interesting nonetheless to see, again, the same groups of people that are promoting the same narrative, and we'll see what evidence they have to show. This could be good. I want to just thank everybody for getting in here and chat, and it's like I look at Northern UFOs, who is my right-hand man. He is incredible, such a support system for me, and Steve and Bill and Irv, and I mean, just a cast of people that I could not thank more for creating this community that is a really important thing, because we are trying to move forward. We're trying to weed through all of the disinformation, the dysfunctional behavior, and we're trying to create something positive, and I love it. And I want to say that tonight, Mark O'Connell was going to come on the show. He's had a family emergency, and so I'm sending my love out to all of them, and he will be on the show. That will be very, very good, so you'll have to stick around. Stay tuned for that. But I reached out to somebody who has been in chat every week and asks incredible questions. And I've said to him, off the air, it's like, when are you going to come on the show? When are you going to come on the show? And tonight, the stars aligned, and he's on the show. And so I am really excited, because we get to hear about the UFO perspective and what is going on from somebody who is living outside the country. And I love that. I think this is going to be an incredible show. So I am here with Peter William Shelley, and if you don't know who he is, I encourage you to go to YouTube and check out his interviews, Shadowy Spectrums, and he did an incredible interview that we're going to talk about later in the evening. But Peter, thank you, first of all, for doing this last minute.
Well, thank you, Erica.
Yes. And so
excited to be here.
Yes. And so tell everybody about your background.
Well, I don't know where we want to start. We want to start with the UFO part, or well, originally, I'm from California. Right now, I'm speaking from Bogota, Colombia, where I've been an English teacher for a number of years. And originally, though, I come from California, born in San Jose, and had an interest in UFOs as a child. Read all kinds of books, saw the programs, movies. Was just fascinated by that subject. And but in 1969, I was fortunate to have an experience that convinced me that there's a reality to it, an absolute reality. And I've maintained that interest since, and it's gotten stronger. And so
tell us, because you were talking a little bit about, before we started the show, you were telling me about that sighting that really, I think once you have an experience like that, it leaves an impact on you for the rest of your life. And listening to what you said was pretty amazing. Can you share with us what you saw in 1969?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, this is San Jose, California, and this was 9 p.m., approximately 9 p.m. on November 13th, 1969, and I was on the back of my house, at the back of my house. I was sitting down, actually, with our family cat, and it was dark, and I noticed out of my peripheral vision this light, this intense light to my right, and I turned and I look at it, and there was a glowing green, lime green light in my backyard. There was no sound effect, and the odd thing is this green light. It was kind of had a neon effect to it. Was intense, but it was not illuminating anything in the backyard. And then immediately it shot into the air, made an arc, and it went over the Santa Cruz Mountains, which is in the direction of the ocean. And as it disappeared behind the mountains, it illuminated the underside of the clouds. And the whole process was totally silent. And my emotional reaction was excitement. I was absolutely delighted that I finally saw a UFO. I had been hoping to see one for a long time, and I just ran into the house screaming, "I saw a UFO! I saw a UFO!" And I was so excited, but oddly, I didn't encounter any of my family in the house, which it doesn't make sense because they would have been there at that time. And I went to the phone. I thought I should call the nearest Air Force base, Vandenberg Air Force Base. And I called them up and asked them if they had launched any rockets. And they said no, they hadn't launched anything. But of course that's absurd, because a rocket or a satellite does not start from your backyard, right?
Good point.
So,
yes.
So that would eliminate that right there. So I was convinced I saw something not of this world.
And so when you saw, after you, talked to or did you tell your parents about what you saw?
I have no memory of that at all. Okay. I and no memory of seeing my parents. My father, my mother, and my sister, my dad. I don't recall seeing anybody. I don't recall even having a conversation with them about it.
Do you recall having a conversation with any of your friends at the time?
No, not at the moment. But I am thinking now, in hindsight, that I'm missing some information, because a UFO would not logically start in your backyard. It would have to come down. Okay, I didn't see that. The experience started with it already in my backyard. Now, I just saw a lime green neon type light with fuzzy edges. I didn't see any structured craft. Okay? So, I didn't see any entities. I didn't hear anything. I didn't get any telepathic messages. So that was the total experience that I recall. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to just say, in '69, in San Jose, California, and I'm sure because you do a lot of research, I mean, were there other types of sightings that were similar to yours in that area?
I don't recall anything. I was not part of a UFO group at that time. But after this experience, I joined the Society for the Investigation of the Unexplained, which was the Ivan Sanderson group. And it was just on the basis of it joining. I got a newsletter. I didn't participate in any investigations. But I never encountered anyone else in that area who had seen anything at that time. And since since this more recently, a couple of years ago, I did call Peter Davenport and recorded it on his site, the event.
It would be really interesting, and I'll have to, as I'm going through Anne's the Anne Druffel archives, look and see if I can find anything that would be in that specific area during that time frame, because that could be an interesting connection for you. And I want to, for people that are listening to the show that are new to the subject, can you give us a little bit of a background on Ivan Sanderson?
Well, Ivan Sanderson was a early investigator of UFOs, of cryptids, and he had written a number of books, really interesting books. Some of his material was dealing with the idea of the UFOs being based under the oceans, which fascinated me. And that's another thing that occurred to me, is that the direction of the UFO when it was leaving was going in the direction of the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, being only like 20 minutes away by car. But he was, I think, maybe more associated with cryptids, but he also investigated UFOs. And he wrote a number of interesting books, but he had this organization called the Society for the Investigation of the Unexplained, and I used to get their publication, and that was the extent of my involvement with his group. And I never tried to join any other group after that. Of course, 1969, we know that was the end of the nightcap era. I'm sorry, Project Blue Book. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there wasn't I didn't have the contacts at that time. Actually, my interest at that time was film. I was interested in being involved with movie production, television production. And eventually I got into that in Los Angeles. I wound up moving down there and getting involved in cartoon animation.
Oh, how cool.
But nothing to do with UFOs. Actually, it was my privilege.
So fun.
I'm sorry?
That must have been so much. It must have been really, I bet the stories that you have from that time period are really cool.
Well, I will mention one personality I got to work with. I'm very grateful I got to work with Doug Wildey, who created Johnny Quest, which in my opinion is the greatest adventure cartoon ever conceived. And I did not work on Johnny Quest. I worked on the animated Hanna-Barbera version of Godzilla and a couple of other cartoons down there.
Oh, how fun. So what was your specific job?
Well, I was in the layout department and would, had the job of drawing hardware that they would use in the show, like a helicopter or a weapon or something like that. Things of that sort.
Oh, cool. Oh, that is so fun. I love it.
Yeah, my original ambition was to be a movie producer, and I kind of got off track.
Well, I can picture you in the film industry and doing something like that. And that's oh wow, that must have been. I love all of that, and so I'd love to talk to you about some of that. When we just have a private conversation. But I've always been, as you've been in chat and you've asked questions over the past little bit. I mean, you have such an in-depth knowledge of things and of NICAP. And so, when did you start to look into that and look at the different organizations, the people involved, and specific things that were being pushed into the mainstream narrative?
Well, my early heroes were the early researchers. Some of them are no longer my heroes, but I have a lot of respect for the early researchers in the pre-internet era, where people actually doing work in the field, investigating. I really respect those people. I think the quality of research now is really really shameful. We're seeing very few people do the kind of research that existed in the past. I wonder if people are really doing investigations anymore. Are people actually looking up at the sky anymore?
No, probably. I mean, I think, and that's a great point. What are we doing? Are we spending so much time on Twitter? Having Twitter wars with people and pounding our chests, and we've got to. We're superior. We're the people that are leaking information and things. And it's like, at the end of the day, you're right. Why aren't we out there? Why aren't we looking up? Why aren't we creating communities where we can get out there and do field research, and then get back to some of the things the reasons that we fell in love with this subject to begin with.
Yeah, there's a beauty in mystery, and this is a beautiful mystery. But I don't have the answers. I don't know what they are, who they are, where they're from, why they're here. I know that it's a reality, but I still have a lot of things that I haven't discovered yet. And I think we all need to get out there and quit waiting holding our breath for the government to reveal the big secret, and let's do our own research. Why is there a monopoly in UFO information? Why is MUFON the only show in town? Why haven't we created an alternative organization? What are we waiting for?
I love the way you're so positive, and it's like, let's push this forward. How do we push this forward? Because we are seeing, in that regard, that things are very stagnant. Because again, you've got so many people are looking at the shiny, disclosure, and we're going to follow that carrot over there, and hey, but we're getting distracted from the real purpose, which should be doing research and getting out there in the field and empowering ourselves. And I think you're absolutely correct. And how do we do that? What would if you had a team of people that you wanted to pull in to work with you, what would be your ideal team?
Oh, well, obviously you would have to be a part of it.
Why, thank you.
Gordon Lohr, we'll get him involved. I have respect for a number of people that are doing work now. For example, Linda Zimmerman, I think she's doing very interesting research. I have high regard for Kurt Collins. Klaus Schwan in Sweden, I communicate with him on a regular basis. I think he and his organization is doing fantastic work. I think, so what would I do? Well, the first thing would be to analyze what is our objective now. Are we still in the position we were over 50 years ago of trying to prove that UFOs exist, or are we beyond that? Personally, I know they exist, that there's a reality that is of a non-human nature. That I'm convinced of. So I don't need to prove that UFOs exist. What is my objective? I think that the objectives need to be defined, or we're just wasting time. And then I think we need a new organization, an alternative to MUFON. They aren't preventing other people from creating a group from groups. Why aren't we doing that? Why are we spending all of our time criticizing MUFON? And there's just a lot of entertainment value in that. And they deserve it. In many cases, they deserve the criticism that comes their way. But they're not stopping us from creating an alternative organization, are they? No. What are we waiting for? I mean, let's get off our duffs and get somewhere with this thing. Let's get off waiting for the government. If the government announced tomorrow that aliens from the Gamma 652 quadrant are visiting the Earth, would we accept that? We wouldn't believe it. So no matter whatever the government does, we're not going to believe it. We got to get our own information. And the government is not going to be the correct source for the truth.
See, and thank you. I mean, I really, and I've talked about this as I'm sure you've heard on past shows. It's like, why are we looking to the government when we know, full well that, there are issues of national security. There are things that need to be put forward that aren't necessarily, it's a diversion. I get it. That's great. But why in the world would we think that, take the UFO subject, why would, why would any of this kind of leak out the way it has? I have so many questions about the rollout with the NAP and the Corbell thing, as do I think everybody in my listening audience. It's just like none of it rings true, and something really, I think, is off about all of this. And why in the world, if there was government disclosure, would it be coming from that source?
Well, my perspective is that it's been a long and careful build-up to not educating the public, but it has to do with money. It has to do with the getting contracts, military contracts. And I think that's what's really behind it, because the military-industrial complex needs constant threats to generate profits. And profits have been down since the Cold War. And the idea that the Soviet Union was the big boogeyman that we had to deal with. And since the Soviet Union is no longer seen as the boogeyman it used to be, although there are continued efforts to try to rebuild it that way in the media, they have to generate possible threats, other threats. And this whole to the stars and all of this, the Nimitz and everything, to me, it's a carefully calculated plan to build up to generating government contracts to deal with unknown drone threats. I know that's my perspective.
No, and I absolutely agree. I mean, it's all about the money. It's all about funding. And if, the United States government really truly viewed these UAP as such a huge threat, would we think that there would be a measly $22 million that was spent on that? Because I really don't.
And then let's go back to 1969. The conclusion of the Project Blue Book was that there was no threat to national security. So what are we saying now? That the United States Air Force of 1969 was totally incompetent? That's absurd. Of course they were competent. But if there is no threat, there is no necessity for government contracts, right? You don't get government contracts for dealing with peaceful elements, right? There's no money in that. There has to be some boogeyman. So
do you think that what do you think about, the ATIP and the OSAP contract and kind of the way that whole scenario rolled out?
Well, this is going to offend some people, but I'm totally unimpressed by all of those elements, the videos, the Nimitz case. I'm sorry, there was so much more information that preceded it that was, I think, had more validity. One thing that has turned me off is the quality of these videos. We're paying millions and billions of dollars in tax dollars for military technology that gives us such bad video. Give me a break. The quality of these videos is terrible. I think this is a deception. I think whether it's a human technology or something else, I don't know. But there is a valid phenomena that's absolutely real, that's non-human in my opinion. And we should all try to do our own investigation. For example, look at the recent robot on Mars. Where's the real-time live video? We're getting almost nothing. They won't even give us a real-time live video from Mars, and we're expecting them to give us a UFO disclosure. And then in 1969, we had plenty of video of the astronauts walking around on the moon, right? And they can't do that now. It's beyond our means, our technology to do that now. They're not even giving us the real deal from Mars. And they're going to give us the real deal about UFOs?
And that's exactly it. And I think it's been so puzzling to me. I think the more I step back and look at things, I mean, it's like, what would be the point of this? Is this, is the Elizondo and all of this, kind of circus sideshow, is that something that would be sponsored by the government as a means of deception or distraction, the red herring thing, or could this potentially be a group of people that is trying to steer a certain narrative and create money for their defense contracts? I mean, which do you think would be the more likely scenario, or could it be a combination of both?
Well, my take on To the Stars is that from the beginning, it didn't smell right to me. It seemed like a total fabrication of somebody else's idea of a UFO breakthrough group that would appeal to the masses. For example, let's how do we make it appeal to the mass? Oh, we're going to throw in a popular musician to appeal to young people. Let's create this group. I mean, it just seems like a total fabrication, a deception from the get-go. Not a sincere effort at all. And isn't it odd that this whole thing is being tied into the Navy? Why is that? I guess so. When the Air Force was previously involved so heavily, supposedly, in Project Blue Book, I don't know. The whole thing and the timing right now during the pandemic to bring out this information to emphasize it. Why would that be a priority? Hello. It just doesn't. I just can't buy it.
So what would be your thoughts on why the timing? Is it that, we've got, the news cycle was so, we could look at when, our past, with Trump in office. There was a lot of news going on constantly. And so now we've got kind of more of a lull in things. And so is there a need to, glom onto the UFO thing because there's something genuine here, or is it because we're just trying to, get more clicks? What do you think?
Well, I think it's simply a matter of money. They need money, and they need to scare the public that there's some kind of a new boogeyman that we have to deal with. And then they can generate the contracts and never explain anything. I think if any reports come out, it will leave the identity of the UAPs, although I prefer the previous term, UFO. They will leave the identity unknown. Or we don't know what it is. Could be Russia, could be China, could be any number of sources. We don't really know, but if you give us umpteen $1 billion, we'll find out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And but and they will never explain. They will never give us any extraterrestrial information. I don't think that's part of the plan at all. I think it's to get us to the brink of making us think that's going to happen, but never going further. Because they don't need to. All they need to do is to generate a threat that's going to concern people. Because if they say it's extraterrestrial, then they're going to turn off a number of people, and they're going to start a whole new scenario. They don't want to do that. They just want to get us to the point where we're scared and we need to spend money to find out more, right?
Yes.
That's my take on it. And
I agree.
I'm not, I could be off on that. And now one thing that does bother me is when people say, oh, if the non-humans or whatever they are wanted to take us over, they could have, but they haven't. Well, hello, I think that's another faulty thinking scenario, because is the only possible scenario, and I'm not saying this is what is happening, but just talking about the concept of an alien invasion, is the only possible alien invasion scenario a direct World War II style D-Day invasion? Hello, what is Dr. Jacobs been talking about for so long? He's been talking about, and I'm not saying I accept his ideas, but there's the idea of the more subtle infiltration of society using hybrids, right? That would be a more intelligent way of taking over.
And so let's talk about Dr. Jacobs, David Jacobs, because again, there are people I know that are listening that they don't have an idea of who Dr. Jacobs is and his contributions or information that he has put forward in the UFO world. Will you just give us a little brief rundown?
Well, sure. I'm not an authority on Dr. David Jacobs, but I've been interested in his ideas and his research, and he has been doing work with abductees, people alleging alien abduction, and the information that he has discovered, according to him, is that there is a program of taking a reproductive material from humans and using them to create hybrids that are being used to infiltrate our society, that are living amongst us, that they have reached a point in this process that they are able to create hybrids that look like a passable version of a human, but they don't have all of the social skills normal humans. So they'll make errors in those areas. I don't necessarily accept his ideas. I would like to talk to Dr. Jacobs. One thing that he has said that I question is that he has always said that the extraterrestrials have total, absolute mind control over humans. Okay, great, fantastic. We've heard telepathy and mind control in many cases. Okay, he has also said that the extraterrestrials want to maintain absolute secrecy of their activities. They don't want people to find out what they're doing. How does he know that? Well, he claims that his abductees have conveyed that information from the aliens. Okay, great. So if the aliens have total mind control over humans, why aren't they mind controlling Dr. Jacobs to shut up? Not to blab to the world what they're doing. Okay, I've been wanting to ask him that for years. And if Dr. Jacobs, you're hearing this, please respond to me. I want to know, why don't the aliens mind control you? Okay?
Or a few other people I could think of.
And then the whole realm of alien abduction, I'm kind of on the fence about. I know UFOs are real, have a reality, but the alien abduction part, I'm not, there's all kinds of ideas on that. So I'm not sure I'm interested in researching that. Now, another thing we should be doing is trying to go outside the United States to get more information. Why do we just rely on the United States as the only source of our information? If we think the government is controlling the information here, let's go outside of the United States. Now, we got to do more than that. We've got to go outside the influence of the United States, which means the countries which are NATO allies, which would also logically be prevented from releasing information. So let's go beyond that. I don't know. I would like to see the UFO field be more productive. We need to get somewhere. None of us are going to live forever. Let's make some progress, right?
Absolutely, and I agree with you. And I think it's that right now is such a pivotal time in the history of the subject, and for the old timers that have spent their whole life, blood, sweat, and tears. They've been on, all these people have been on my show numerous times. They're looking at the news cycle now, and their hands are just up in the air, and they're like, this is what this has come to. This is 50, 60 years of dogged research and people, really sacrificing personal relationships, putting their jobs in jeopardy. Really serious things, spending everything in their bank account to collect research, to, make sure it's going into a safe place. And then you've got people that, it's just like, okay, here, great, we're going to start a YouTube channel and we're going to see how many hits we get. We have nothing of substance to really offer, and now we're going to create this new narrative, and we're going to completely forget about the history of the subject, which is telling us that we are repeating the same thing over and over again. It's the same playbook. You know?
Yeah, let's start really trying to analyze how we can make some progress here. And I think if everyone start spending some time looking up at the sky, not just at your computer, that would be a factor. Form your own. I would like to see people start. I was talking to you before the show about the fact that in the early days of the subject, there were a lot of people were starting a lot of what they called UFO clubs. Now, why aren't people doing more of that now? Let's see people forming their own UFO club. Start doing your own research in your community. I'm sure you would find in every community people interested in meeting and in trying to do investigations and doing night watches. Let's start doing some real research. I mean, that's a real pleasure in itself, doing the research, your own research, right? Instead of waiting for CNN to announce a disclosure. Let's start doing our own work.
And you bring up a really good point, and this is something that I've really loved over the years. It's getting involved in that grassroots effort, and also, going to different places in my community and collecting reports or digging through archives and making those connections. And then, for me and I've got a great group of people here in Utah that I've been working with and that are helping me archive everything that I have now. But it's like we try to do extensive work as far as looking at, okay, here we've got different places that are military installations. This is where we have a concentration of sightings. These are, this is how it is rolling historically, and what are specific things that are unique to an area, and it's, so this has been like a long process, but I really think, I know Mario, Northern UFOs, does that in his community as well, but that's really cool. And thank you for bringing that up. It's like, just get out there and collect stories and interview people. And I had, I just have to say this because it makes me smile. There was, in my Pilates studio, I always, it's like we're doing a workout, and the subject always has to go to UFOs. So you just come in the studio, get a workout, here we go, UFOs. You're getting an education. But it is amazing to me to see how people will say, oh yeah, well, I had this experience, or I had one client that came in and, oh yes, she was the best friend of the Shermans from Skinwalker Ranch's, daughter. And she told me about several experiences when they were living at the ranch. Or this other wonderful fellow who worked at Los Alamos and also was working at Utah, on Utah Lake. And he had a series of sightings, or over the lake, and it was just like, whoa. But his daughter's like filming him. He's recounting the sightings, and it's so cool, whether people are seeing a UFO or not, to have that history and to make sure that history is preserved.
Yeah, and it's a living phenomena. I enjoy researching historical cases, but it's a living phenomenon. It hasn't stopped. We can continue to do our own investigations. And now another aspect that no one seems to talk about, everybody talks about the government secrecy. What about the secrecy of the phenomena? The phenomena itself maintains secrecy. I don't know if other people agree, but the fact that the phenomena is clandestine is something that should also be questioned. Why is the phenomena, if you accept that, and I do, why is the phenomena clandestine? Why is that? Could it be that, there are many cases of humans trying to shoot at UFOs? Could that be a factor? Are human beings a dangerous life form? Okay, all of these things could be part of the reason why the phenomena is clandestine. So it's not just the government. We can't just blame the government. The phenomena also wants to maintain secrecy. And I used to be against secrecy, but now I can see different perspectives. For example, let's imagine some researcher discovered a community of Bigfoot, for example. Oh, I don't believe Bigfoot exists. Well, let's just imagine for a moment. There's a Bigfoot community living in some area, and we don't know. We don't have a lot of information on it, but it's being investigated. Do we want to broadcast the location of this Bigfoot community to the world? Would that be a good idea?
No. I mean, look at what happened with Area 51. I think that's a prime example of why some locations might need to be kind of kept on the down low. So there is, when there is a research effort taking place, people aren't just tromping through and, acting like they do.
Yeah, what would happen if someone exposed a location of a Bigfoot community? What would happen? Well, there would be certain elements that would want to shoot them, right? And then we'd have a whole pile of Bigfoot corpses. So is that a good scenario? No, obviously not for the Bigfoot. So I know that if you think about it, maybe secrecy is not all that bad. And now the government secrecy, that has other motivations. I think. Well, I don't know. I don't have any special government contacts. But yeah, I would like to see starting to make some progress in getting more international information. Let's stop recycling information from the United States.
But come on, Roswell. I know your feelings on Roswell, but just tell people listening.
Well, you want me to piss off the Roswell researchers?
Yes.
Well, I really don't think. Okay, well, there's a certain amount. It's a certain amount of interest. Like go out in the desert with your metal detector and look around, poke around in the desert. That has an appeal. But is that really making progress with the UFO topic? There's so many current cases to deal with. Why are we still talking about Roswell? I studied the subject. That's one of the topics, the UFO topics, that I'm not interested in hearing about anymore. It's Roswell. I don't think we're going to make any progress with listening about that. And then I was there. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was excited when there was news of a new Jacques Vallée book. It was going to be released, and is out now. But I was kind of dismayed when I learned that it was, there were other people who were involved in creating that book. In the past, Vallée has been like the standard of UFO research excellence. I think some of that has been, in my opinion, we can't. In my opinion, I have to take the Jacques Vallée portrait off the wall now. I don't have the same reaction to him. I think the impressive research is going to come from other areas. His books in the past have been impressive. I have some of his books on my bookshelf. Yeah, I was impressed with his work in the past, but there's a lot of people now. There's some people now that I respect, but very few compared with the past.
And that is sad. I mean, I will say that it has been, I think there has been, from what I've been just kind of monitoring in the community, there has been this kind of collective, like, gasp at certain events that have happened, and it's just one of those things. Again, it's like, you hold people in this certain regard, and then other things happen that kind of question that. And why are we again going to a crash saucer? Really, at the end of the day, you can't verify that. I mean, it's just I don't know. I mean, what do you think about the crash saucer stuff? I'm sure I know your answer, but I'd like to hear it anyway.
Thanks for mentioning that. Well, there's a number of topics in the UFO field that I just really have trouble with. And then one of them is UFO crashes. Another one is treaties with aliens. First of all, okay, we imagine maybe that the non-human intelligence is coming to the Earth from another star system. They have the technology to do that, but as soon as they come to Earth, immediately they're crashing like crazy, like they don't know how to drive a car. Give me a break. Give me a break. That's totally unrealistic. I just can't buy all of these crashes. What's really going on? I don't know. Again, I kind of buy the idea that the UFO subject is being used as a cover in many cases for secret projects. I buy that idea. Crashes I have a real problem with. And another one is treaties with aliens. That I can't buy. Why would, and it keeps on popping up, this idea that aliens had have a treaty with the United States government, for example. Okay, why would that be necessary? Aliens supposedly have this UFO technology. They can go through walls. They can abduct people at will. Why would they need permission, a document permitting them to do that? They can do that at will. Do human scientists need a document from monkeys to go into the Amazon jungle? I don't think so. It's absurd. But people seem to buy these illogical ideas.
Well, and again, that kind of plays into the conspiracy culture and all of those things. And I mean, it's like you go down that rabbit hole, and there are aliens, extraterrestrials in the Pentagon, and we've got all of these, the benevolent space brothers are here from Nazi Germany, and it's just like, what is going on? And it's like it's become so ludicrous that people are believing this kind of stuff with nothing that is tangible over, a simple fact. And how does that even happen?
Yeah, the whole, the 1950s golden era of contactees fascinates me, but I don't buy their stories. I consider them wonderful stories, but I don't accept that they had real extraterrestrial experiences. I don't buy George Adamski. I love his stories, but I think it's science fiction. Now, there are some examples of contactees that I think may have been valid. For example, there was a woman named Stella Lansing who years ago would take movies of UFOs with a 8mm or Super 8mm camera. And I think, and there was another woman, I think, I forget her name, who had a similar ability with a camera to take pictures of UFOs on a consistent basis. I think those types of those people could be valid contactees, but not in the Adamski sense where there is some blonde Nordic showing up and giving them a tour of the galaxy in a UFO. Is there contactees, but of with different characteristics?
Well, they look like go-go dancers. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, it's just so. It's really interesting. But Stella Lansing is someone that I have always been fascinated with because of the photographs that she took, her story, and from my recollection, and this has been maybe a couple of years back, but I think Tim Beckley was on the show, and he had some of her, or he had worked with her. There was some connection, and some of her materials, I guess, were abandoned in a house, if I'm remembering that correctly. I know that in the Androffa files, there's also a file on Stella Lansing and some of her photos, and so that is a really fascinating name. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and then there was another woman who I can't remember her name right now, very similar, but on
Dorothy Izat?
Yes, that's her. And I think there's validity to her case. She had the same scenario, taking movies with a 8mm camera, I think, or Super 8, and in both of those cases, there were interesting, strange details. For example, I'm not sure if it was Stella Lansing or Dorothy, who and they was shooting silent film, movie film, but when they got the film back, there was a sound on it. I forget who that was, but my point is, I think there are some examples of contactees that could be valid. I don't rule that out, but in neither of these cases did the women describe the George Adamski type effect, where the humanoids are showing up at their house or whatever, giving them a tour of the solar system. Now, I have looked into interesting contact cases in other countries.
And we're gonna get ready for a break so we can go grab some water and everything. But I want to talk about that because I'm especially interested, and I think like we say, we get so wrapped up in American ufology and the Nimitz and all of this stuff that we're neglecting some of these other cases that are really fascinating. So we're going to talk about that, and I want to just give a shout out to Scott Brown from In the Field, who's in chat tonight, and that was who I was talking to about Stella Lansing. And so that's fascinating. So anyway, thanks, Scott, for reminding me about that. And I'm here with Peter William Shelley. I knew this was going to be a fascinating conversation. Thank you for being kind enough to come on the show at you had an hour to prepare for this, but I just think I really, like I said, I respect your comments. This is cool that you are outside the country and you can give us a fresh perspective on that and what you are seeing. So thank you. We are going to take a break. Thanks for getting into chat. You can go to UFO Classified to pledge your support to the show to help keep me on the air and to keep the archives up and running and help me hopefully get more so we can preserve the history, keep this subject moving in a positive direction, and definitely kind of weave our way through some of the landmines. So we will be right back, and thank you, Peter. We'll catch you after the break. Live right now. I am Erica Lukes, just happy to be back here, and Friday evenings, this is where I can't think of any place I'd rather be than hanging out with my friends, getting into chat and seeing Ken and Scott and Northern UFOs and Jeff and the whole gang is here, and we make quite a great community. We understand that there is something we need to be looking at and researching, and we also understand that there are things that we need to look at and questions that we need to ask if this subject will be taken seriously. I definitely want to just throw this out here. I know this is going to be a shock for you, but given the recent, surge of UFO information, and again, we've got, here's another groundbreaking thing, just wait for it, and then, you've got this a video, and I guess we'll see where that goes. I'm sure it'll be more of the same. Let's get in a little hamster wheel and see where we end off. But in my opinion, and the same for my guest this evening, we have other areas that we really should be looking at if we want to truly study what is going on. So thank you, Peter, for being back on the show, or for being on the show and then coming on at such late notice. But I love some of the things that you're talking about, and you are in Colombia, which is very cool. And so you've got this outside perspective of what's taking place in America. And so when you were looking at what's going on here, I mean, what are your thoughts? And do you just kind of scratch your head sometimes?
Well, yeah, I scratch my head. I don't know. I just, to be honest, kind of disgusted with the quality of the information. And I'm just looking outside the United States for information, for answers, and wondering, for example, why do we have such a huge area of the world which is silent on the UFO topic? We're not getting information. For example, the former Soviet Union, the countries of the former Soviet Union. Why is there this perception of total, almost total silence on the subject? What is going on in other areas of the world? Recently, I've been doing some interviews with people in some other countries to find out, what are interesting cases there, what is happening. Recently, I had the honor to interview a researcher in Hungary. That was, I think, a kind of a breakthrough to get information from that source. This is a young researcher, Laszlo, in Hungary, who has managed to have contact with the military archives in his country on the UFO topic and to get information. Now, they also have a secrecy or have had in the past in Hungary on this kind of information. But it was interesting to find out about cases in his country, and also some examples of the contactee phenomena there. What's the point? Well, is the information, are UFO cases the same in other countries? Are there differences? Can we learn something by comparing that information from the information that we get all the time from the United States? For example, in the United States, the common report when entities are involved would be the gray, short humanoid. Now, what's interesting, I discovered in doing an interview with a Spanish researcher, is that in Spain, they have a lot of cases of giants. So that's an interesting difference. So what's happening with that? They have maybe more cases involving giant humanoids, figures that are like twice the size of a normal human.
And what are some of the other characteristics?
Well, they have also, in an example of Spain, they have their share of hoaxes and fake cases also. One thing that has kind of been around the world now is this old Umo case, which some people still buy to this day. But it's a pretty well has been determined by serious Spanish UFO researchers to have been a hoax, a fabrication of a man named Horton Pena, who concocted this whole extraterrestrial scenario as a kind of a psychological joke, and also as a way of controlling people. It's fascinating from the perspective of a hoax, one of the most elaborate ever created, because this guy what's absurd about the UMO case, if people haven't heard about it, was in the 1960s, in the mid-60s, UFO researchers started to receive letters. And these letters were typewritten, supposedly from extraterrestrials. Okay, and these letters had all kinds of fantastic scientific information that impressed people, and there was a whole following, like almost a cult, dealing with this, with these so-called Uma was supposedly the planet the aliens were from, and this hoax got out of control. It got so extreme that there were people quitting their jobs, giving this researcher Pena money for investments, and it was like a cult. And to this day, there are people that still believe the UMO hoax, and they're so convinced because the information. Now, the guy Pena who created this was a science teacher. He was so he had a background, and he had access to. He was a science teacher, and he had access, of course, to all the scientific journals of the day, and created a hoax. So it's a very interesting case in Spain, and it's spread to other countries, but it has really no real validity. So other countries have this problem with hoaxes and deceptions, and
cults. I mean, that's the interesting thing. I mean, there's so many. I mean, I look at ufology today and think, in a way, it's a cult. You know, certain aspects of this, or you look at that, and I mean, it is interesting, and you read Jacques Vallée's Forbidden Science 4. And he references that case multiple times, and so I don't know. I mean, who specifically bought and promoted that specific case, or that whole idea?
Well, there was a kind of a UFO group in Spain, in Madrid, that used to meet at a bar and discuss, these kinds of topics. And already in the beginning, there was, it was a kind of a social thing. I don't know how serious these people were, but this guy named Horton Pena joined this group, and then they used to share these letters that the researchers would get, read them out loud at these meetings, and it just expanded from there. And now there are some photographs associated with the UMO case, but if you look at, as a child, when I first saw these photographs when I was a child, I thought they were hoaxes. It looks like somebody just threw a plate up into the air and took photographs. And these objects have a big UMO symbol, which is kind of an M or an H type symbol on the belly of the saucer. But obviously, obviously they're hoax. They've been analyzed and shown to be that there's a wire that the object is suspended by. Now there were cases in Spain which I did think had merit. Looking into the Spanish cases, there were a number of cases where people encountered these giants at night. In one case, a truck driver encountered these figures. So I don't know what's happening with that. There seems to be a good number of cases involving giants for some reason in Spain. Recently, I also interviewed a guy in Chile, Patricio Abuslemi, who has written a book about a very interesting case of Corporal Valdez in Chile. And this is a case where there was a military encounter. And I think this case is not a hoax. I think that there was something strange that happened. And there are a lot of details to that case. But the reason why I think that it's a valid case is partly because there were animals involved and the reaction of the animals. This was a case that was unusual because it happened in a ranch where there were hundreds of horses being kept for military purposes. And these objects came down at night, and there was a squad of soldiers involved, Chilean soldiers, and the animal reaction was terror. The horses actually got behind each other, like in a line, which is a very unusual effect. You can visualize that. Now, what is unique about this case, the Corporal Valdez case, is that the soldiers were experiencing terror, but Valdez left the group and he disappeared for 15 minutes. And this is the most controversial part. He disappeared for 15 minutes and they couldn't find him. His men couldn't find him. And then he reappeared and he seemed mentally affected. He had a growth, a beard growth that was unexplainable. In other words, he was a soldier. There was, all the soldiers are well shaved, right? Supposedly. Okay, he disappears. 15 minutes later, he reappears and he has a full beard. And his watch is depicting 5 days in the future. So it had a lot of interesting details to this case. And so I think every case needs to be... Now, I was very impressed with the quality of research, Patricio's research. This guy did a phenomenal job. I recommend people to look into this case because Patricio, he personally, this was not an internet project. He went out in the field. He went to the location. He interviewed dozens of people involved in this case. He did years of research. I mean, he did an amazing job. I really was impressed. And he still doesn't know what really happened. He had this speculation that it could have been actually some kind of a military deception. Because at that time, in the late 70s, there was a possibility that Chile would have a war with Bolivia and Peru and possibly also Argentina. And his speculation was that maybe it was a stealth helicopter. However, there was two objects, and they were completely silent. There was no sound. There's speculation that he may have been abducted. I don't know. There's a lot of details to this case. Very complicated.
It is a really fascinating, very involved case. And, I do have to wonder, looking at that case, was that some sort of military project?
Well, one of the things I asked him is about the animal reaction. Do animals react in terror to helicopters? Now, they did, in addition to the horses, having hundreds of horses there, which is kind of unique to that case, they did have a police dog. The police dog was an absolute terror. The police dog was normally a very aggressive type and hid during the UFO experience. Now, would a dog react that way if it was just a helicopter? But he didn't have an answer on that.
I mean, it is interesting. I'm sure I would react that way if it was a helicopter. It would probably be, it's loud and I mean, there are lots of things, and so you never know how animals would react with that. But it is interesting that over the decades, some of the main things that people have been studying, are animal reactions. We look at the work of Gordon Lohr and some of the reactions that happen with, radios being shut down, cars being turned off, all of these types of interactions. And so is that a result of being close to UFO technology, or is that perhaps something that was a technology that we have been developing?
Well, yeah, I don't know. My feeling is that something anomalous did happen. Now, another question. Now, this was a very remote area in Chile. If it was a non-human event, well, why would this area be of interest? It's a remote area. There's nothing there. It's just a flat land. And this was very isolated. What would be the point? There's nothing there of strategic interest. There's no nuclear reactor there that would draw the attention of UFOs. Why pick that location? I don't know. Perhaps from space you could detect all of these horses, and that would be something that they would be curious about. I don't know. But I was impressed with the quality of his research. Now, there is some physical evidence, because the primary witness, Corporal Valdez, was sent to a military hospital for an examination where he was for about a month. There is a medical report on his condition. So there was some evidence in terms of the medical documents. And the medical documents, I've read them, say that Corporal Valdez experienced a quote-unquote cultural hallucination. What's a cultural hallucination? I don't know.
Yeah, what would you think that would be? That's very interesting.
And then I guess animals can experience cultural hallucinations too.
Can you define that?
Yeah, I guess their idea was, it was really weird that how the doctor diagnosed his condition. He wasn't crazy, but it was just like some kind of a temporary hallucination that he suffered. And I guess all of his men suffered this hallucination too at the same time, and the horses and the dog. It just seems absurd. But he has tried to get, he tried to do a Freedom of Information request with the U.S. government. He sent, for example, a request to the CIA, and the CIA wouldn't give him any information. They said something to the effect that we cannot. His request was to the effect that it was a very good request. I read it, and how it was worded, specifically to that event. Was there a undercover CIA operation or U.S. government operation in that area at that time, at such and such a date, at this location, blah, blah, blah. And the response he got was that we cannot confirm or deny that such an event happened. That was the extent of it. He didn't give him any information. So, now the other thing is this was at night, and let's imagine it was a stealth helicopter, the stealth helicopter scenario. Okay, let's say they could have made, in the late 70s, a stealth helicopter that was completely silent, which I doubt, but let's imagine that. Now, as the blades were rotating on the helicopter, wouldn't have that had some effect on the light source? Wouldn't there be some kind of interplay between the rotation of the blades of the helicopter and the light source? When there, in other words, when you see some kind of light source fluctuation in sync with the rotation of the helicopter rotors. But they weren't experiencing that. The light was now there were it was an oval-shaped object with purple, kind of a purple color, but it had red lights on the sides. So, I don't know.
And so what was the time frame of that again?
Well, that's another mystery, the exact time. It happened after midnight. It could have been, for example, like 1:30 in the morning. And they noticed these lights in the sky coming down. And there were two lights. One went behind a hill, and the other was in the foreground. But the object stayed, some distance away, no sound. But sometimes it would increase in intensity, the light. Now there was supposedly a hypnotic regression years later. And this hypnotic regression is controversial because at one point in the regression, supposedly Valdez actually levitated above the bed he was on. Okay, so did this happen? I don't know. But he, in this hypnotic regression, described seeing figures inside this object with white helmets, and that the interior was bathed in red light. So that's about the extent of the information that exists on the hypnosis. Now, this Corporal Valdez, after he was not dismissed from the military, you would think, oh, if he's crazy, he's having hallucinations, he would have been dismissed. No, he continued. He was transferred to a different area. All of these soldiers continued in the military service, and he remained in the military for years beyond that. And then he retired, and he went into religion. He became like a minister at a church. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's a very fascinating case.
And so, what year did that take place?
Right now, for some reason, I'm blanking on the year. I believe it was a 76.
Okay, 76. Okay. Interesting. And then, how would you say that would compare?
I don't know. I worked on it for so long. I should have it memorized.
No, it's okay. I'm totally.
Or 77. Please forgive me, Patricio.
No. It happens. I'm telling you. And so, how does that? When you think of that case, and then you think of Rendlesham, what do you see any similarities there, or is that a stretch?
Well, yeah, Rendlesham, and that's another case that I'm tired of hearing about.
Yes,
but,
I know, me too. But
yeah, that whole case is so murky, and we've got every crazy theory on that. I think the best theory I heard was the debunker said it was wasn't there a debunker story? There was a fertilizer truck on fire, something absurd.
Well, I have not heard that one, but that's could be interesting. God.
And yeah, Rendlesham. Now, I was actually living in England at that time. I lived in England in 1980 and 81. So I was there. I didn't see anything, but I was there in London at that time. Didn't hear about it until afterward, of course. So what is my perspective on that? Recently there was information that interested me. Well, the information that interested me was the binary code that was detected. One of the witnesses touching the object, and then
Jim Peniston,
right, getting this binary code. Mm-hmm. But then recently, it was someone that discovered. I think it was Philip Mantell posted on his website that the binary code, almost exactly as it was, that Peniston described, was in an X-Files episode years ago.
God, that is so awkward.
Code, and they showed pictures of it, screen grabs, and it's like the same effect.
That's convenient.
Possible, But it's a very interesting aspect. I don't know the whole thing. Now, the subject of UFOs and nukes, I think, has a validity. We've heard cases of that. That's a very interesting topic. UFOs over nuclear reactors. I think there could be something to that. And then the fact that recently, for example, Peter Robbins has backed away from his primary witness for his book. Mm-hmm. I know the whole thing is so murky.
It is, and a lot of people have made money on that case over the years, and so they have a kind of a vested interest in keeping the narrative going, or staying relevant with all of that. And again, it's like the Roswell thing. How much can we see about that, and how much over time does the story change, and what are the motivations behind it? And I'll never forget being at the UFO Congress in 2017, and I was there speaking, and there was, Professor Erling Strand, who I spoke to Alejandro Rojas, and I said, please bring him over because he's so incredible, and he did. But it was shocking to me to see that there were, maybe a couple hundred people, if that, in the room when one of the world's most important, in my opinion, researchers was talking about some really profound things that they had discovered after 35 years worth of research. And then you've got a line out the door when you've got Colonel Halt, who is talking about the same old song and dance. And that really, to me, was such one of those defining moments where you just thought, okay, I guess this is all about this, just spinning a narrative, keeping that narrative going, and some people just don't want to see the real meat of this subject. It was very strange.
I don't know what to make of that. I followed it, but I'm not an authority on it. But I'm not looking for cases to convince me the UFOs are reality. I'm already convinced of that. I guess I'm looking for additional information. Another thing that I have questions about is the reports of the different kinds of entities that are supposedly seen. For example, does the whole Nordic alien phenomena have any validity? We originally heard that come to us through primarily Adamski's stories, which I don't think have any value except as science fiction. I think that whole scenario. Of course, I'm not talking about Rendlesham right now, but did you want me to continue on Rendlesham or?
I mean, and I appreciate you going there, because I know, again, it's like, oh, okay, we've got the same old, but I think it is important for new people that are listening to just understand that these are our opinions on some of the cases that have made, that keep making the news and people keep rehashing and yada, yada, yada. So I really appreciate that. That's important. And so please continue on, with what you were talking about that wasn't to do with Rendlesham.
Well, I would like to find out, for example, we've heard about the UFO and Nuke cases dealing with the Maelstrom case, the U.S. missile silos type of thing. Now, there's supposedly similar cases in Russia. I would like to hear more about those, because the interesting supposed difference, or one detail that was different, is that the missiles in Russia were activated to be launched. They weren't deactivated, they were activated to be launched at supposedly some different targets. So I would like to hear information about UFO and nukes from other countries. Other countries have, of course, that's going to be difficult to get, because that would be secret information, just because of the fact that it's dealing with nuclear weapons. But other countries have nuclear weapons. What about France? Other countries in the world have. Now, here's an interesting fact. Speaking of the continent that I live in South America, everyone is aware of the Cape, the U.S. launching rockets from Florida, Cape Kennedy, Cape Canaveral, whatever you want to call it now. Is anyone aware that there is a huge space complex in French Guyana in South America? Does anyone know about that? I didn't know about that till a couple of years.
No, please, please tell me more.
Well, I was looking into what's happening with Devil's Island, which is a infamous French prison located on an island off of South America, off of French Guyana. Okay, so it's defunct now. It's not a prison anymore, but it's being used for like a satellite technology, which is connected with the French space complex in Guyana. So, I thought, this is interesting. Let me check that out. So I look at the Google images, and the French have a huge space complex there. It looks like NASA. They've got something that looks like the space shuttle and everything. Nobody talks about that. What's going on with the French space program? I've never heard about that before. That's a whole nother. Now, is there a UFO aspect to that? I don't know. I haven't heard of anything, but here's just something that I didn't even know about. Nuclear, the nuclear aspect, I think it's very interesting that there's been a UFO reports in the Hudson Valley, which Linda Zimmerman covers extremely well. UFO reports over on the nuclear reactor in that area. I think we need to expand things beyond. Of course, England is part of NATO, so I think we should try to get some information from other countries.
Right, and so, and I wanted to say that that I have somebody listening that just gave me the information that France launches Ariane rockets in Guyana. So anyway, that was just interesting. I love that. I get these little tidbits. That is quite curious. So anyway, I mean, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's something that's it's not in. I've never seen any news stories about it. So it was just an interesting discovery. If there's anything UFO related I haven't discovered yet, but in the future I will look into that. Now, what about Russia? Why do we have such a silence from Russia about the UFO topic? And then there's all this speculation that some of these triangle UFOs could be Area 51 technology. Okay, maybe that's a possibility. No one ever speculates that any of these triangle UFOs could be Russian technology. And the Russians developed these stealth theories before the Americans. Actually, the Americans, quote unquote, borrowed their stealth secrets to create the stealth aircraft. So, why are we having this silence about Russia? Are they not interested? What's going on there? And then another thing, there's only one person in the world we ever hear who has information about Russia, and that's Paul Stonehill. Now, I think his research is very good. He's very interesting. But he hasn't lived in Russia since the early 1970s. Why don't we have, in 2021, a contact inside Russia that's giving us information? And the same for China. I mean, come on. Hello? That's my...
Because, you had mentioned before we started this show, I mean, you were talking about different countries and information that was getting filtered out before it came to you or other countries. And so what types of, we're talking about different cases. I mean, how would we know? Is that being filtered? And what types of things are coming your way or not coming your way in that regard?
Well, it was interesting to discover from my interview with with Laszlo in Hungary that they also had a secrecy about the UFO information there, and that, for example, pilots were not permitted to talk about UFOs. Now they had a suspicion. Now, in the Hungarian information was interesting because they had the suspicion that UFO researchers were spies for the United States. So that was their perspective and why they wanted to clamp down on the information. There's a very famous Hungarian UFO researcher, Kolman von Kövesky, who lived in New York, but he was originally from Hungary, but then occasionally would return to Hungary to talk to friends, try to do some investigation, collect some cases, and their whole perspective was he was an American spy, interested in the Hungarian military activity. So everyone is suspicious of each other in this world, and when are we going to join forces and get somewhere? And why don't we have a real international effort on this? Why is it still so fragmented? We have UFO researchers and groups in different countries, but no real strong international organization. And if you look at the MUFON website, you see that there's international contacts listed, But I had the experience of contacting those emails or trying to and not getting any results because I wanted to get international information. I was very discouraged by that. And it is not easy to get international information. I think people in other countries are kind of suspicious of Americans. You have to gain their confidence. It's not easy.
Right.
So it's no wonder we're not getting that information. And in the case of China, I was recently trying to get contact with a Chinese researcher, and I'm still working on that. That's another area. You know, supposedly they have a lot of UFO interest in their country, but with a slightly different perspective. They are allowed. You would think, oh, communist China, they can't talk about UFOs or investigate. They're allowed to look at the scientific aspects. But if it gets into something metaphysical or contactees and something that's kind of a little bit religious or kind of, you know, non-technical, then they view that as a cult, and that's illegal to go in that direction. They can't do that. They can examine the scientific part of it. This is my understanding from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I finally interview someone in China, and I'm talking about mainland China, maybe I'll get some different information. So.
And so, I mean, and Sue in chat asked a question a while ago, and it's kind of along the same lines. I mean, do other countries have better luck with collecting evidence with cases, or are they basically just eyewitness reports as well? And do other countries get cooperation of airports and military with radar data?
Well, Laszlo in Hungary was able to get access to the military files, but he did not feel he got complete access. It was a limited access. And as far as evidence, there was another case I wanted to interview him about, but it wasn't his personal research, so he didn't want to talk about it. There is a very interesting case of a supposedly alien object that was given to an abductee, supposedly a magnesium rod that had an unearthly origin. But I'm still in the process of trying to find out more about that. And unfortunately, the object supposedly, if this is a true story, we don't know, but this rod that was given to this abductee, supposedly by an alien, was later examined, was determined to be almost pure magnesium, but unfortunately the person that had the rod cut it up so it could be examined by different laboratories, and material was lost, and I'm still trying to find out more about this case. It sounded very interesting, but that was one example of some kind of physical evidence. But if that's true, I don't know. There are photographs on the internet of this object. So who can say?
Right. And I've got to, because we just have a little over 10 minutes left in the show, and I want to ask you about something that has had a kind of people have inserted their religious beliefs into the subject since, the subject's inception. And so now again we're seeing this big push as far as, these whatever we're seeing, these are angels or they're demons, and so what is your take on that aspect?
Well, I put it in the category, it's another topic that makes me cringe, along with UFO crashes, alien treaties, and the demonic perspective. I have never experienced anything that I would characterize as demonic. And I hear the stories, I read the stories. I think there is some validity to this idea that there is a group, Collins Elite, or who knows what the name is. There are people that believe in that idea. I don't buy the demonic perspective. But I notice, I won't give any names, but I notice that there are people that will directly express that perspective, that UFOs are demonic, but then there are other more subtle researchers who try to disguise their perspective that it's demonic. They don't really want to tell you right up front. They want to kind of camouflage what they're doing, but eventually there's little hints of it. Yeah, I don't give any credence to the idea that UFOs are demonic. And the way that I detect that in UFO or abductee cases is if they bring up the topic of the soul, that the aliens are interested in our soul. Yeah, that I think is perhaps a clue that this person has the demonic perspective. So, yeah, I don't give that any credence. I think it's interesting to read about, but I don't see any evidence. Of course, I'm not a religious person. My background is not religious at all. Yeah, I don't buy that. I think it's interesting. Another thing that makes me cringe is this whole reptilian business.
Oh, you just ruined my night. What? That's not even real?
Yeah, that's another on my list. Reptilians.
Oh, I thought David Icke was totally onto something.
Yeah, I wish we would come up with a different word for reptilians. I'm tired of hearing that. Another thing, we need another expression to substitute for
somebody who's been out in the sun for too long.
Well, it was as big as a football field.
Yeah. That's another good one.
Let's create a new expression. How about as big as a blimp hanger?
There's a little book that it's a little teeny book with a lot of pictures that we could put out there for, hey, if you're going to describe things, here we go. And that's what's so interesting, to me. And you mentioned the tall Nordics, and you mentioned, all of these kind of go-tos for stories that have been inserted into the narrative potentially. And things, and I think with David Icke and the reptilians and all of that, I mean, there's a bigger theme to what they're putting forward, which is definitely one that has concerned me, and I've talked about on many shows about this kind of white supremacist supremacy. I don't know. Anyway, you've heard me talk about it before, but I think that's where David Icke and co have definitely gone.
Yeah, I think these stories are interesting from a science fiction perspective, because I also, like I said, I enjoy that. They make a good elements for a science fiction movie, pure entertainment type thing. But the reality is, I don't think, another. Yeah, I'm open to. My idea is that there is a genuine UFO phenomena dealing with some kind of a non-human intelligence, and also there is the human high technology being using the cover of UFOs to camouflage black projects and so forth. Yeah, I think both are valid. But reptilians and we got to come up with another expression. What's another expression? Now, here's another thing that's interesting, is that I've tried to on other shows put questions to supposed abductees. The extraterrestrials never have names, never seem to have names for their species. The Greys never call themselves Greys. That's our expression. What is their expression? You never hear that, right? And abductees supposedly don't have an answer for that. So
that's an interesting point.
Yeah, so far I've asked a number of abductees, supposed abductees, what the aliens call themselves, and they don't seem to have any names, which is kind of interesting. Now there could be, if they're telepathic, and maybe they don't need names. Maybe there's some kind of a sensation that comes with telepathy that substitutes for verbal names. I don't know. I'm just imagining. It's a wonderful topic. I just wish the human race was worthy of contact. And it's very discouraging to see the world in this condition. And why would any beings from another world want?
Right. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. And that I just lost Peter. Are you there? Okay. So anyway, that's I'm just one of those things. So right as he was making a great point, I lost the connection. Shocking. And it wasn't me this time, you guys. This is the seventh sign of the apocalypse right here. But I know that from what I had talked with Peter about, and he was mentioning the fact that, why would an advanced civilization want to come to Earth when the Earth is in such chaos and disarray, and we have little respect for other, our planet or other living creatures. And so I think I will speak for him, and I'll try to ask him and get him back on the show, but I think that is definitely where he was going with that. And so I want to just, again, thank all of you and Peter for being such a great sport and coming on the show at the last minute. I want to also give my love and send my prayers to Mark O'Connell and his family tonight. They had an emergency. He will be back on the show, or he will be on the show, hopefully in the next couple weeks. Just we can see how things play out with his personal things. But I love doing this show. I love being here with you. I love thinking about things and opening my mind in new ways, going on adventures, talking to people. And that's the most important thing for me at the end of the day is just talking with somebody and hearing their experiences. And I don't know. I love this, you guys. I want to say that my research, as you know, has kind of taken a turn where I'm a little bit more not combative, but if I'm seeing something that really reeks, I'm going to call it out, because we have to do this. There are, as you know, so many people in this subject that are, well, not so many, but a handful that have been kind of stirring the narrative, creating chaos for far too long. They are at it again, and I think that's really unfortunate to say the least. And so, hang on, I think Peter is. So you're back, and I was just closing up the show, and so I had just told everybody your closing thoughts. But why don't you do that for us?
You're still on the air, okay?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just kind of repeating myself, but why don't we all start doing our own research and then sharing some information? Start doing making some contacts with people out of the area, and stop holding our breath for the great government disclosure, which we would never believe whatever they tell us, right? And let's get outside. Let's get away from our computers and start looking up at night. I want everybody listening to this show to look out your window tonight for at least 1 minute. Can you do that?
1 minute? Yes, I can.
1 minute. Give me 2 minutes.
And you know what? Honestly, that seems like when you look at how many people are looking down at their phone or spending time on Facebook and stuff, 1 minute seems like an eternity. So I think that's a good goal. 1 minute. Let's do it.
Yeah, and but try to look carefully at what you're seeing, And I actually probably would take more than 1 minute, but
you know what would be fun? I mean, honestly, I think it would be really cool if one night we all, with some of the people in chat, some of the people who listen to the show, it's like we all go out to our own space. We get the telescopes or, our binoculars, and then we all just have a little conversation with each other. And, hey, this is what we're seeing, and isn't this amazing? And if nothing else, it's just being outside and looking up and having all of these wonderful questions about reality, about where we are, about how either significant or insignificant we are in the universe. I mean, there's so many cool things that can ground us and unite us, and so maybe we should make that a goal, that we'll have a night where we're just out there and looking up and talking to each other.
Yeah, and I think we are really fortunate to be fascinated by this mystery. It's really a beautiful mystery, and I think just the possibilities are infinite. The whole realm of the unknown and the mysterious phenomena, just so fascinating, and I think we need to take this in a more positive direction and start doing some research, start doing some investigation. I think everybody has that potential. And I like the idea that we are the disclosure, not the government.
Absolutely, and that's always what it's been about. And I think it's, again, this is, people are using this as a control system. And it's like, let's give away our own personal power to the government or to another person, because they're going to tell us, things. And it's just like, yeah, like you've mentioned multiple times in the show, that's, we need to get over that. Just disclosure is just simply, that's just not even going to happen. I hate to say it, we don't need it to. So there you go.
Right, and go to your local used bookstore and pick up some UFO books. Start reading real books again. That's I'm on the internet all the time, but I also really enjoy books, getting information that way, and also enjoy looking out my window, which I'm doing right now as I speak.
Well, good. And speaking of books, and we've got, I just want to say this for another minute or so. I mean, if you are looking for good books, of course, Clear Intent. You got to have that. I talk about that all the time. Definitely. I believe Greg Long's book on the things that were taking place at Yakima, James Bunnell, and his work at Marfa and things. I mean, those are such great books, and I will make it a plan to get into my website and put a list of suggested reading, because I've got this huge archive. And I will say that while some of the books are very entertaining, it's definitely we need to have some caution with that, but it's never ending. It's fun. I love it, and thank you so much for being on the show. When are you going to do your next YouTube show?
Oh, in about a month.
Okay.
I'll have a new one, and I'll let you know as soon as I can give you more information. My idea is to do one a month. That was the original intention.
And so, where can people find you?
That's a good question. I should set up a Facebook just for. I'll be setting up a Facebook just for shadowy spectrums. So at the moment, I'm just on YouTube. If you look up shadowy spectrums, And then in the near future, I will have a Facebook Shadowy Spectrums page.
Cool. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for being here. You are awesome, and we will definitely talk. And again, thank you to all of my listeners and people that are supporting the show. Go to UFO Classified to pledge your support. We are just getting to the point where we're covering costs for the show, and I appreciate that. So if you're listening, $5 a month, $10 a month, that helps a great deal, not only with keeping the show on the air, but also with doing the archiving and storing and all of this stuff. There's so much. But thank you for the people that do support the show and all of the people that get into chat. I love you guys. Have a wonderful weekend, and thank you very much, Peter. You guys stay safe.
Welcome.
And I will catch you next week. Thank you.
So my skeptical mind, and that's just who I am. My skeptical mind goes to, well, yeah, of course, you've got this guy over here that's logical and reasonable, and you got this guy over here that's wearing a tinfoil hat. Of course, the tinfoil hat guy's gonna see a lot of stuff, right? He's like imagining it, or he's watched one too many sci-fi movies.
But it's used to help us frame hypotheses for UFO propulsion, power, stealth, weaponry.
Everything that we experience is very positive.
Sometimes the field of ufology has a short memory span.
We didn't know anything about the $22 million back then. We just kind of thought, well, this is, and I think that was the reason why they were looking for military-type people, because in the military, you work with whatever you got, no matter what the situation is, and you just kind of adapt and overcome.
What are you going to do with all this? You can't even take care of your own files and get them put into the current system, but yet you want to go collect other people's things. So what are you going to do with this? Who are you giving all this to?
It just really struck me about how the common thread seemed to be deception, but deception of a human nature. So that's what I started thinking, who would these folks be? I mean, then I started thinking about the intelligence agencies, what role they could play, and what would be their motivations for getting involved in ufology.
I'm not saying that because the gimbal is not a rotating flying saucer, that means that all the UFOs are false. Not at all. All I'm doing is I'm looking at this one case, these individual cases, and seeing if there's an explanation for those. So try to, if I could ask people out there listening, don't think that I'm trying to attack your entire beliefs about these things.
Nice to be in orbit.